Hi guys, welcome back to Trail Talk. I'm your host, Aaron Shimons. This week I have an interview with Francesco Puppi, ex-Nike athlete. So we're going to dig into Nike, sponsors, PTRA, the state of the sport, Golden Trail, Sky Running, sponsors, contracts, you name it, we're going to get into it. So before we get into that, got to just shout out our sponsors. Thank you to GOREWEAR. Check out the link down below and use the code IRunnerMountains30 for 30% off. And also TORQ Nutrition. Again, code down below and the link and AFRN10 for 10% off there. But without further delay, let's get on with the show. Francesco Puppi, welcome to Trail Talk. I'm delighted to have you on here as the first guest of 2025. First off, how are you feeling and where are you connecting to us from?
Thanks for having me on your show. I'm connecting from Como, Italy, so just north of Milan, on the south side of the Italian Alps, near a big lake for people who have visited my area. 2025 was off to a pretty good start, I'd say. I have been at home for like 3 months now, which is kind of unusual because I travel quite a bit for training and racing. So it's been nice to be home with my girlfriend, with my family for a while. Yeah, just putting in the work. Like I was reflecting how I don't really need like an immediate race or like a tangible goal to put in the hours. Like for example, in November and December, I was doing close to 90 hours a month, but I was not like training for a specific race. I was just training for the sake of it. Then of course training is never wasted, like it's always for some kind of fitness that will eventually show in a race or somehow. But just the process of training has been very enjoyable. Of course some days are better than others, but overall that's what I like.
And what is your sort of training focus in the winter months?
Yeah, so I was coming from a very good 2024 season. I took a break by the end of the season, which for me was mid-October till, say, beginning of November 2024, without any structured training. It's not like I was completely resting, but just not pushing, not training every day, not having a plan, just taking it easy and listening to my body. And if I wanted to go for a bike ride or for a hike, I would just go instead of running. And then November and December are big base training months. So for me, it's a lot of cross training with the bike. I was doing 10 to 15 hours a week with the bike, some running, but no workouts, some easy running and strides and just getting into the training routine, and then complementing all of that with some consistent strength training, which has been a staple in my routine. And I find it very beneficial. So I try to really lay a very good foundation in terms of aerobic fitness and strength to then develop my training into more specific workouts and training blocks when I plan my calendar.
And whenever you're sort of thinking about your season, which we will get into, I've got some interesting questions about that, try and extract some juicy details about your plans for the year. But do you have any early season, even local races in the region, in the Southern Alps or anything that you will target just as to check the fitness as such?
Yeah, I thought about it, and that was my strategy until last year. I was doing a few cross-country races and some road races. This year, I chose a different approach, like kind of easier on the intensity side. So I chose not to do cross-country. There are a couple of pretty big cross-country meets around where I live. One is Campaccio, that is like a World Athletics gold label event. So it's pretty big and pretty important. And it's been my classic season opener for the past, I don't know, maybe 10 or 15 years. Like I've run it a bunch of times. And I love cross country. Like, it's so much fun. You run, like, it's basically like fast trail running with the spikes. So it's a lot of fun, but it's also pretty dangerous because it exposes the body to a lot of stress and the intensity and risk of injury, of course. So I don't know. This year I wanted to change a little bit my strategy, also because I think I'm planning to focus on longer races throughout my 2025 season. So I think an approach that is a little bit more relaxed and less heavy on the intensity side is maybe better. I don't know. We're gonna find out. So no races for me until now, but I mean, I don't know. I could maybe jump into a local 10K or half marathon, just like Katie Shai did last week in Nice, for example. She had a pretty solid result. I would say she ran 34:10, and I really enjoy running on flat, like on the flat on the road. I just don't want to push too much too soon, because then the season is very long and it's going to be demanding.
I think it's maybe a good time now to dig in a little bit more on the season then, because you have teased a few things in the past week or two about sponsors and races and things like that, and I'm determined to get a bit more of a clue of what XCC, which letter that we're Xing out here. But if I think about your history and what you've been doing really well in the previous years, you always turn up at the World Champs and you run well. Like, that distance has always been really strong for you. Does that mean that you're considering World Champs but longer this year?
Yeah, I'm definitely considered the longer race, the long trail race at World for many reasons. One is a technical reason, because I think with such a demanding and technical course, I have a better potential on the longer race instead of the shorter one, which is more like closer to a sky race maybe than to an actual trail race. Then I'm sure it will be like super nice, super enjoyable. But also, after a number of years in the short trail distance and feeling like I have given my best to that specific event, I want to change just because it's fun and I can do it. I have created for myself the possibility to choose among different options, and I feel very privileged to be able to do so. So I think it'd be fun to jump into the long trail race and see what I can do. And I think that's also aligned with the idea of my 2024 and 2025 season to explore some longer distances and efforts around maybe 10 to 8 hours. Last year it was more around 6 to 7 hours for a couple of races that I did. And then I think I've mastered the 50K distance quite well. So yeah, trail running is not just one event, but it's like a big bucket where many different things go. So it's fun to explore all the
I
sides of the
love
sports.
I love how in more recent years that we're seeing athletes will maybe target a particular race on a specific distance, but it doesn't exclude them from doing those other distances either. They're just not the main focus. Whereas if you think back even maybe 4 or 5 years ago, there would have been 100K athletes, 100 minor, people that they tried to specialize in a distance, and you didn't hear about them doing sky races or 50Ks or 80Ks. But it seems like we're coming into this new kind of world of thinking about it, and it kind of goes hand in hand with what you're saying.
Yeah, I think there are like two opposite dynamics. One is relative to like specialization, like specializing on one event and trying to be really good at that specific event, whether it's 50K, 100K, 100-mile, whatever. And the other is versatility. And I think we've seen a number of athletes being able to perform across a wide range of distances, but it's not like they're less specific on their main event. It's that, especially for the longer races, it always starts from the quality of your training. And unless you're really able to produce that quality in your training and in your performances in short distance races, I think it's getting harder and harder to be competitive at a high level in the sport of trail running. So I think a lot of athletes have understood that unless they're able to produce this quality in their training and really perform in shorter distances, they're not going to be able to win on the 100K or 100-mile distance. So that's pushing the whole sport forward and making the level in those, like, not just the level, but like the density at a high level of those events even higher.
Yeah, a time that gets you a podium one year, the next year it might get you a top 5 or maybe even just a top 10. So
Exactly.
it seems to be happening that way across all of the distances year on year. It's just getting deeper competition.
Yeah, then of course I really encourage and support athletes who want to specialize and master a specific distance. That's maybe easier on the shorter distances, but yeah, they're like, I think if you look around, there are so many examples of good athletes approaching the sport in different ways and being successful, coming from very different backgrounds. And there's not just one way to approach the sport and be a good athlete. And that's a beauty of trail running.
Yeah. So on the subject of going to Worlds, the Italian team is obviously one of the very top teams in the world, as alongside France and Spain and the countries that surround the best mountains. So you guys obviously have funding as a team. Do you have to reach into your own pocket to cover any expenses if you go to Worlds, or is that picked up by the authorities?
Yeah, it's completely covered by our national federation of athletics. So trail running is pretty much considered at the same level as all the other events that are part of the Olympic program, for example. And we don't just have the trip to the World Championship covered, but there will be a couple of training camps during the year and opportunities to train with the national team and maybe do a few tests and get medical support. Yeah, they're really trying to support the whole team from the juniors to the seniors, from mountain running to trail running. So I think they've done a really good job over the years to give importance to the national team and really supporting it in a meaningful way.
In a world where trail runners aren't making, a big living, they're not living the high life, that type of funding really makes a difference. Because if you look at like the Irish team or the British team, there's next to no support or very limited support. And these athletes are already having to have numerous side hustles or maybe another career just to compete for their country at the sport that they love. Is there anything happening from like the PTRA or any other initiatives within the elite athletes that are trying to help these other countries that don't have funding?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, it's not that having a national federation funding the national team makes a huge difference in whether you're a professional athlete or not, because then in in the 50 weeks that you're not running for the national team, you're just on your own and you don't necessarily get support from your federation. So obviously your main income should come from other sources, whether that's sponsorship or another kind of job. But I think it's about making the national team attractive and a priority over other races and goals that athletes may have, sponsorships, obligations, and such. I mean, I don't know what we're concurrently doing to encourage more federation to fund trail and mountain running teams, but I think by setting the example and seeing how successful some federations and countries have been, that's already a positive thing. And being open and like sharing about it is another thing. And then we've been in touch with a number of federations as PTRA. They may reach out to us to ask for advice. We also have athletes who are part of the PTRA who can then report to their national federation. because some countries don't even know where to start, like don't even know whether trail running should be affiliated with the National Athletic Federation or to the Mountaineering Federation. Sometimes there is a conflict of interest between the two, such as like the situation in Spain, for example. It's very particular, so it's very country dependent. But yeah, I mean, each country has its own individual story. I don't know. It's definitely an issue affecting way too many athletes, and I wish I could somehow support them. But I think the mere existence of the PTRA is like a way to help them, because I mean, we're here. They can get in touch, come to us and say, okay, here's the problem. How do we handle this? How do we handle this situation? How do we handle the fact that our federation gives no support? Can you talk to our team managers, to some people who work for our federation to change that? And then we are also in touch with World Athletics regarding the organization of World Championship events, anti-doping testing and issues, and a number of topics that an international governing body of the sport should take care of. So we're very happy that they're consulting us and they're constantly in touch with us to address these topics.
Yeah, I guess I kind of mean it in the sense as well about just the fact that if it's going to cost, let's just pick a figure of €5,000 for you or a person to attend the world champs, the travel, the accommodation, this type of thing, and pro athletes are already on small wages, if any wage, let's say €50,000 as, a number in the sky. So it kind of like every little bit helps. That's why pro athletes are, in some senses, sort of maybe reluctantly taking on athletes to coach, because they're having to just put a little bit of money back into the pot to cover these other things, because €50,000 in today's money doesn't go very far, and these are like yourself, you have, I think, a master's in science. You could be pursuing a career that's a lot more affluent than pursuing your love of trail running.
Not in Italy, though. I mean, 50,000 a year is already pretty good for trail running standards, I think. Could I make more money than what I'm currently making with my physics degree? I don't know, but I doubt, at least here in Italy. So in Italy and at 32 years old. So, I mean, that's a whole other topic, but yeah, you have to make it work. We're not rich by any standards. And unless you're driven by passion and really wanting to live these kind of experiences, then the sport is probably not for you.
Yeah.
I mean, so like, obviously we have to make for a living, so we have to live, but we can live a pretty simple life and still be really happy, and we don't need a lot of things. Like, you just need a roof, a bed, and food, and some money to travel. But yeah, we're not pretending to live like soccer players or basketball stars.
If you compare, let's downgrade it. Let's go €40,000 or whatever the number is. It doesn't matter. But there's a finite time that a pro athlete can compete and earn that wage, whereas somebody that has a full-time career of a similar salary or even a lower salary, which would be, let's say a school teacher. A school teacher would earn less than that. The healthcare, they have the pension, they have the ability to save and invest part of their money for decades, whereas the pro athlete in trail running, I don't know, 15 years might be a good career.
Yeah.
So, there's all of these other considerations, and I totally get your point on we don't need much. It doesn't take much to make a trail runner happy. Some just some good outdoor space, some clear, enjoyable running, and we feel complete. But that completeness doesn't last, into your 40s and your 50s. So I just feel like it's not. There's something isn't adding up there in the financial space.
Yeah, I mean, just something I wanted to add. Like, my message is not meant to say that we shouldn't be asking for more money, like higher wages and higher contracts. Absolutely not. But it's just a reflection on the reality of the sport, where there's probably 70% of people of what we consider pro athletes who are making a lot less than what you think, and probably some people making more or a lot more than what you think. But these people are just maybe the very top athletes. So it's hard. I think the brands have a lot of leverage in contract. The money it doesn't trickle down to the athletes, because these big brands and corporations are making a lot of money in the sport, but this money doesn't always go to the athletes. And it's not that it's not like the athletes are the only one producing this wealth and money, but I think there should be more recognition for and respect for what professional athletes are doing, especially at the very top. So yeah, it's a huge topic, and talking about value and how much you're worth as an athlete, what is your marketing value? It's something that I struggle with, and it's not what I do. Like, you should be talking to a manager about that, because my job is to run, not to talk about contracts and those kind of details. And I think sometimes we expect ourselves to be good at everything, like negotiating and storytelling and running and everything, but we're just athletes, need to run in first place. So yeah, I'm going down a rabbit hole, but it's a huge topic that definitely gives me a lot of thoughts and reflections. So yeah, it's not discussed enough, I think.
Well, we can go down any rabbit hole you want to, so don't be pulling yourself back. Just continuing on this topic, you touched on the fact that there is money in the sport, and we know how much that the Hoka and the TerrX and on and things are bringing in, and it feels like, we talk about in normal life or in real life, not trail running, that there's the 1% that have all of this money, and then the masses are just getting by, or there's a massive middle class. And it's almost like in trail running, there is a 1% of pro athletes, and they have these big salaries, big, we're talking in the region of €1 million, these types of contracts. And then we have this whole big middle class of athletes that are on like everywhere, ranging from not very much to a decent living. What are the PTRA doing to try and basically to try and get athletes paid more? Because, as you say, it's hard for an athlete to have that conversation, and often, I would say, in a lot of situations, the athlete is happy to get a contract. And that comes before the other conversation, which makes the other conversation impossible to have.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. We're still at a stage of the sport, of the growth of the sport, where an athlete is just grateful if they get a travel budget and free gear. And with basically like zero support from the brand, they can call themselves a professional athlete, which they're actually not. But we're growing, and things are definitely changing and improving. I know it for a fact. So I think it takes time, but we'll get to a point where athletes will be paid more fairly and just more money. Then I don't know what should we aim for? Like, it's when I compare sports to like the life of an athlete and how much athletes are making compared to any other jobs. Like, athletes are making a lot of money compared to doctors, teachers, any kind of job that it requires a lot of effort and a lot of knowledge and responsibility. And at the end of the day, we're just running. I mean, it's not that, I mean, it requires a lot of effort and passion and hard work, but there's so many people who, like, for what from the outside looks so much more effort, they get paid a lot less. So, I mean, I think putting the two things into perspective, it's useful. Like sometimes we're talking about, 2,000, 3,000, sorry, 200, 300, 400,000 euros per year. Like it's nothing, but it's a ton of money for one person. So I think it helps putting things into perspective. And then coming back to your question, what are we doing as PTRA? So far, not so much, unless like dealing with particular issues that athletes may have, and they come to us and we can discuss and see what we can do, and maybe we connect the athlete to a lawyer or a manager and they deal with their specific case. We have just started a series of webinars for PTRA members only, to like basically educational webinars where athletes can learn and educate themselves on sponsorship, contract negotiations, what should they expect from their brand, and what they can ask, what they cannot ask. I think education is fundamental, and if we want the sport to become more professional, it's also up to the athletes to behave and act in a more professional way, because that's not always the case, I think. So yeah, I think it's a first little step, but it goes in the right direction.
What is your opinion on we hear this athlete and influencer and this collision in the middle, because even at its core, the athlete is sponsored by the brand to represent the brand, which in its sense, it's influencing people. Look, this guy or girl looks quick. They are quick. They're wearing our stuff. And then Joe Blogs on the street wants to be that guy and buys the stuff. So it is just a spectrum of influencing. But I think where a lot of, we have this movement away from performance focus. And if you look at television over the past 15 years, the typical drama show or whatever has been replaced by reality TV and documentaries and this type of thing. And that's also the stuff which is working for influencers, behind the scenes stuff. And these people are runners. They're running in nice places. They're doing the things that people might aspire to do. And the question I'm trying to get to, maybe I've labored a little bit, is like, what do you think that happy medium is between athlete and influencer? Because it feels like the athlete has to do something in today's world.
Yeah, it's a very good question. I think there was an article that really had some good takes on the athletes versus influencers dynamic at the end of last year, which I can send to you. But yeah, it's true. Like, not necessarily a good athlete is a good influencer, or like someone who is like good at communicating and like is like they present themselves in a positive way on social media and they are like inspirational. I think for some athletes it's totally okay to just focus on performance, and a lot of athletes are inspiring just because they can produce amazing performances and push the boundaries of the sport forward, and they don't have anything particularly interesting to say, or they don't have a very, I don't know, attractive personality. And because that's the reality of the sport. I mean, not everyone has super interesting things to say or to share with other people. For other athletes, it's different. They can run fast, and they also bring a message with them, whether it's linked to the sport or not. But yeah, there are some really good stories. Sometimes they're not told enough. So I think one way that pro athletes should be highlighted and helped more is by telling these stories, and the brands could do a very good job on this side, like give the athletes the platform, the tools to tell these stories, show the person behind the athlete and behind the performance, like what does it really take to get to that level of performance. Because the athlete is not necessarily good at storytelling like an influencer is. So if you help them, they're maybe even more interesting than an influencer. I mean, at least in my opinion. Um, by then, I don't think we should see athletes and influencers as necessarily two separate categories. They can overlap, and it's not like one against the other. Even though I think in the past 3-4 years, the influencers have quote unquote won the game because they have taken away from athletes more budgets, more marketing money, which are cut from the performance, the athletes' budget, because of course brands have a limited budget to dedicate to sports marketing. And I think, I don't know, like a more balanced environment, if that makes any sense, should
Yeah.
be, it's probably healthier for everyone. Like it's more authentic for the fans, the audience. It's better for the athletes. I don't think influencers have always provided values to the communities that they speak to and to the brands, because like, I don't know, like sometimes is like if you look at those TikToks and Reels and Instagram posts by some influencers, and you ask yourself, what is this person really trying to say? Like it's very empty, and there's nothing really behind the the fancy video or whatever. And I also think there is an intrinsic value in performance, especially when it's really a good performance, which is not always easy to tell, especially in trail running, because it's not like you run a 205 marathon and that's obviously a world class result without metrics and without culture, without a way to really measure performance in trail running. It's not always straightforward to understand when a performance is worth attention and when not. So unless you're an athlete winning a very competitive and prestigious race and everyone is looking at your result, then it's not always clear who is really good and who is not. Yeah, so many dynamics overlapping again. And I don't know. I don't have a clear answer, but just a few reflections and takes, I guess.
That 1% that is commanding the biggest salaries in trail running are also the trail runners that kind of get away from having to do any type of content. If you look at Courtney Dewalt, like she doesn't really have to do anything. She's just Courtney's being Courtney and winning the
Yeah,
biggest races.
I think as athletes, we shouldn't feel any pressure to produce content, because that's not our primary reason to be affiliated with a brand, to be sponsored, to be paid some money. And it's way better if you are authentic, if you express yourself for what you really are and who you really are, without feeling pressure to post, to tell something that you're not comfortable with, to present yourself to your audience under a certain light that is not your own light. You see Courtney, and she posts probably whenever she feels like, and that's very authentic and inspiring, and people love her. And I think whenever she posts, she receives a ton of appreciation, and Solomon likes it, Courtney likes it, and everyone is happy. So I mean, that's a good example. Obviously, she's probably one of the best athletes of our sport, so that's maybe easier in her case. If you take the 30th ranked athlete in our sport, that's maybe different, and to really inspire people and to tell something different, share something that gives a different perspective on a certain topic. Maybe that's not just, performance, but again, if you're not authentic, you're probably not going to write or say very interesting things.
Yeah, yeah. We could go on about this for quite a while, but there's some other things that I think are important that we cover in the time that we have. I would love to know a little bit about your own journey with Nike, and obviously your contract ended with them at the end of last year. And I know you've been teasing us on social media in your own influencing way of what's coming, and I can tell you that from the Trail Talk WhatsApp group, if you're posting something, it's getting screenshotted and circulated into a chat and zoomed in. What shoes is he in? And these types of conversations. So I know there's dozens of other conversations happening around that. So I know you're not here to break any news on sponsor, but are you in the testing phase of different brands, or what can you tell us?
Yeah, I think I'm past the testing phase, and I have made my decision, and I'm looking to finalize my contract with the brands that I will be running for since 2025 onwards. So yeah, it hasn't been easy to get to this point, because leaving Nike was definitely not a decision that I made lightly or in a matter of a couple of days. I don't know. At the end of the day, it felt like the right thing to do. And I have been in Nike for 5 years, and I'm super grateful to the brand and the people that helped me become the person I am, the athlete I am. But then I think I'm looking for other projects now, particular like a team environment, which Nike didn't really have the possibility to share my activity as a pro athlete with other professional athletes in sort of team, even if it's an individual sport, and just maybe a little more support on field, like at races and for training camps. With Nike, it's been very nice, but we were just basically on our own as athletes, and we had a lot of freedom to do whatever we wanted, which is obviously an advantage in some situations. But I think now I'm ready to change and looking forward to other experiences.
Why do you think that Nike think about the trail team in that way? Because you're totally right. I remember whenever you first started wearing the Nike kit and you were running in the earlier Golden Trail races that I saw, and it kind of did feel like you were there alone in a sense. And if I try to think back to, or even in recent years, where can I identify a Nike team? The only thing that ever pops up is that, was it 2015 Nike Trail USA team coming to UTMB, and there's never any other stories about Nike. Is that
Yeah,
down to the budget that they're putting to the sport?
the fact that you remember that team probably tells us something. Like the fact that that team, that vibe, that atmosphere and narrative that they were able to create, it really did inspire someone. It really did make an impact on the sport and on some people. So, I mean, if I were Nike, I would try to bring back that type of environment, that type of team, and that vibe that is what makes Nike what it is, different than any other brand. But I don't know. I think I've realized how being in a large corporation as Nike is, they have a lot of power, and there is the potential to do a lot of things, but then to make these things happen, it's sometimes very difficult because there are so many layers, and you need to get approval for anything from the smallest thing to the biggest. So even just to, convince them that we should probably have a team manager, we should probably do a training camp, we should probably, get some support at least at a few selected key races. That was probably well understood by some people that were working with me or were responsible for me in Nike, but then it never happened because I don't know. So maybe smaller brands where the structure is a little lighter, they have less budget, obviously, but they make things happen much more quickly and much more efficiently. And then another thing that I was reflecting on is that Nike is in trail running, like they're producing apparel and Nike trail shoes, and they have a small team of athletes, but not like they're definitely not making money from trail running, because where they make money is from people who walk in the street with the Nike sneakers. So what is their interest to really develop a project, a team, and invest a lot of energy and budget into trail running? I don't know. For a brand that is an outdoor brand with the DNA in the sport of trail running, it's a lot different because that's where their business is and that's where they need to make money, and they have all the interest to sponsor races, sponsor athletes, support the growth of the sport, because as the pie gets bigger, they earn more money. And as long as we live in a economic system that prioritizes growth and capitalism, I think unfortunately the economic growth and the margins that they make at the end of the year will be the main measure of the success of any brand, unfortunately.
A couple of other points on the sponsor front. I ran a poll on Instagram. I do that quite a lot. It does feed into some questions and things on the show, but I can tell you hands down, everyone thinks you're either going to normal or La Sportiva. That's what everybody said. I'm not going to ask you the question.
That's
I will
awesome.
not put you on the spot, but that's what the audience thinks. When can we expect a decision, or when can we expect you to unveil?
Probably end of January, early February. So in about a month.
Very cool. All right, let's move on a little bit, because this interview, for the viewers' reference, this interview came around because of a post that you had made about a lack of trail media in Europe and things. And I initially reached out to you in September to talk about Golden Trail, and we didn't continue that conversation, but the genesis of that really was how the Golden Trail series is evolving, and kind of not evolving in a way that I kind of like the look of. And you made a post about that and voiced some of your concerns, and I kind of wanted to elaborate on that back then. But really, let me throw some stuff out to you, and then we can just have a chat about that. So I'm particularly hurt that Dolomites and the Marathon de Mont Blanc are not part of the Golden Trail World Series this year. I think that's a massive loss for the series, for fans of the sport, because of the live streaming and things. Obviously, those races are still existing, still doing their own thing, still will be hugely popular. But to be dropped off the series and be replaced by other races, some people interpreted that as, well, these other races can be classics in their own time, and these other races are great races. But I would have liked to see them adding to the series rather than replacing. And I likened it to the evolution that Formula One went through for about 15 plus years, where they started to drop classic European circuits like the Nürburgring in Germany, and there was even talk that Monza was going to lose the Grand Prix, and Imola in Italy, a classic race. It dropped off the circuit because they replaced them with where they wanted to grow the market. They brought races in North Africa and Asia, and they kind of pivoted and now have a much better balance, and everyone's happier. And it took the drivers years and years and years of complaining, like, we love the Nürburgring, we love Monza, before the kind of the sport pivoted back. Love to know your take on where the Golden Trail is going, and also about the Dolomites and Mont Blanc.
Yeah, good question. I don't think we can quite compare with Formula One, just because the size of the sport is dramatically different, and the money involved especially is very different. And also, like, is economic growth the main driver, like the main goal for the sport of trail running, or something else? Because then when economic growth happens, it feels like someone in the community is always like skeptic or complaining that things are not as nice as they used to be, and blah blah blah, which is maybe true, but then we need to be at peace with what we're doing and where we're moving. So what do we want? Like, first is asking ourselves, what do we really want? Because if we want to preserve the Golden Trail series as it used to be, awesome. That's where I lean on. Like, I think the original Golden Trail series, with the 6 most iconic short distance races in the world: Dolomites, Marathon de Mont Blanc, Sierre Zinal, Zagama, Pikes Peak, Glencoe, was the best. Was the reason why I started doing the Golden Trail series. Now with some random Asian race on a flower format, it feels like they have lost their identity, their DNA, and that's obviously disappointed a lot of people, a lot of fans, a lot of athletes who loved the Golden Trail series for what it used to be. But I don't know, maybe evolution is good. Maybe we're really gonna reach new athletes, a new audience, new people, a new market in China, in Japan, wherever the Golden Trail series is gonna take place. And maybe that will benefit the sport in 4, 5, 10 years. I don't know. So evolution always comes with pros and cons, and I haven't figured out yet what really works for trail running. I think trying to replicate a format that has maybe worked for other sports is a little bit dangerous, just because our sport is so particular. Like, it's very, very hard to film, very hard for fans to connect and really be captured by the live streams, the dynamics of the races going on. It's a participation sport and not very much a fan sport, where there is like a large audience that wants to follow the best races and the best athletes. People mainly care about, going out for a run and finishing a nice race in a good environment, in a nice community, getting their finisher medal, and that's it. And I have nothing against that. I only think maybe a better balance between a participation sport and a fan sport would be more interesting, and would probably make the sport a little healthier sometimes. But also, I'm aware that my perspective is the one of the athletes. So of course, I mean, I'm also myself a huge fan of the sport. I follow everything. I am a huge track and field nerd and fan. So personally, it feels super exciting to follow the action, the competitions, the best athletes, and what they're doing. So that's what I like to see. And it's maybe less interesting to, read about gear review or whatever people like to read. So as far as the Golden Trail and where it's going, I don't know. I think they have tried a few experiments that I'm not sure whether they worked or not. It feels like sometimes they don't admit that some idea that they may have had didn't work, or maybe like changing the strategy is okay, and there's nothing against that.
I feel like the only good reason to replace classics with new races and not expand on the size of the series has to purely just be a financial one.
Yeah, I don't know. I think it was driven by the necessity to do like live streams and produce a TV friendly format around 2 hours. That's why they got rid of Marathon du Mont Blanc, for example. Not sure why they got rid of Dolomites, because it was right around that format. But yeah, since they started collaborating with Eurosport, that's what it felt like.
What do you think of the whole flower format and the concept that this is something that would be useful for trail running in the Olympics?
To me, it feels way too artificial. I mean, you might as well do loops because it's pretty much the same thing. And it's funny because like Greg Volet, the mind behind Golden Trail Series, has always criticized like the World Champs and the like mountain running format with loops. And now he's basically doing the same thing, if not worse. And now he's pushing for trail running to go to the Olympics, while 4 or 5 years ago he was absolutely against that. Yeah, people changed their mind, and that's totally fine. Obviously, it's just funny to think about it. I don't know, the flower format, is it really providing any entertainment and the value to the fans and the athletes, the public, and just people who are following the races? I don't know. My answer is probably not, but then probably they know better than me. They have some data that proves that the flower format is the way to go, or maybe not. I don't know.
The whole thing about the flower format was to make it more viewer friendly in person, more fan zones. But aren't fan zones in trail running really crew that are waiting on to see their runner, or they're supporting their particular runner rather than going there to spectate a trail race? In some senses anyway.
Yeah, I don't think fan zones have provided like have attracted more fans than what a normal race would already attract. So they probably don't work. But I think we should be looking at the races that really attract like big crowds, like UTMB or Zagama and Cerzina, where people come out on the course to watch the competition, the athletes. And it's not just, the athletes crew helping them at aid stations and their families, but it's a larger group of people who comes out on the trails to cheer and watch the race and the athletes.
The authentic fan zone.
Yeah, that's the authentic fan zone. And I think if you look at those examples, you have to be able to create an environment that, like a vibe, I don't know what it is exactly, that makes people want to be there. Like you want to go watch Katie Scheid at Valersine on the UTMB course because it's cool. Like it's fun. You want to see her. You want to see her in that specific moment. You want to go on Sancti Spiritu in Zagama because there is 10,000 people and it's amazing and the atmosphere is crazy because it gives you emotions, and because of the atmosphere that specific race is able to create. That's what attracts people, I think. And how do you build that? I don't know exactly, but if I look at these kind of examples, I think, yeah, we can probably learn a few answers.
Yeah. All right. I know we are coming close on time, but I've got a couple more things I just want to ask you. World Trail Majors came onto the scene just over a year ago, let's say October of 23. and kind of felt like they come out of the blocks trying to get some media attention around the UTMB Whistler debacle. I know the word is that's not the case, but the timing was perfect for that. This year they've just announced the short series. I'm particularly happy that they haven't called it the Sub Ultra series, but they say it's kind of 20 to 60 kilometer is the short series sort of remit. I'd love to know your thoughts on World Trail Majors. Is it anything that you think pro athletes are interested in? Are sponsors taking note of it? I personally look back to the days of the UTWT, and it was a great series. It coexisted with other things that were happening, but it doesn't feel like the World Trail Majors has kind of captured that.
Sure. Yeah, Ultra Trail World Tour was the first idea of a world circuit. That's why, like, it was the only one that existed back in the days. So that's why it gained some popularity and attracted some athletes, because it was really like all the top ultra trail races in the world, and World Trail Majors tried to replicate that in an environment that was already oversaturated with circuits and projects, probably. So of course it's not the same thing as what it used to be. I think the value is probably more on the race organizer side, where there is really like a common ground, like a shared knowledge, and like this race organizer helping each other. But it doesn't feel like there is an infrastructure, like a strong project behind. If you just look at the rules of the circuit, for example, like those races still feel like not part of a circuit, like they exist independently, and they don't have a common set of regulations. For example, the anti-doping is managed by the individual races. It's not like centralized. Yes, there is prize money for the circuit, but like, what is the added value of winning the World Trail Major for an athlete? I don't feel is enough to justify the award, I think. I don't know. To me, it started more as a reaction to what happened with UTMB, and they probably were hoping to gain some popularity and fans and athletes from the discontentment that was happening within the community, within the trail running community. Then people quickly forgot about, maybe didn't forget, but they just moved on from the UTMB issues, and UTMB was also making some good moves and some good decisions. I think last year, it felt like they reestablished a good relationship with the community and with the athletes. And UTMB in Chamonix, the finals, felt like a huge success, and no one was complaining, and everyone was very excited. So, I mean, the popularity of UTMB is probably as high as ever. So to build the World Tour Major as a reaction on the backlash that UTMB got was probably not the smartest move, because it's not a base that is solid enough to justify the existence of a new circuit. I think it's more important to work on the identity of World Trail Major and what they really want to provide to the sport, to the community, to the athletes, and really think about their mission.
So do you think that sponsors and largely like a good proportion of pro runners don't really give much thought?
I mean, they care about the races just because they're important and
But the series,
fun, nice races to do. I don't think they give that much importance to the whole series. To me, and probably to other athletes and some sponsors, World Trail Major just feels like a label to define, those 10, 12, whatever number they are, races, but not much more.
Yeah, okay. I will not dig any further on that one, but I do agree largely with your points there, and they were well made.
This is not to say that they're not doing a good job. I mean, it takes time to grow and to establish, and they only exist since last year. I mean, UTMB and Golden Trail didn't nail everything from the first year. I'm sure there is a lot of room to improve, and yeah, it's probably a good thing that we have a circuit that is challenging the leadership of UTMB, because otherwise they're just the number ones, and they're acquiring more and more races, and no one is really competing with them, and maybe the standards get lower. So it's maybe a good thing for the market. I don't know.
Yeah, I think on a personal level, one of the takeaways really from last year was how it was an easy 10K for Courtney to, do a couple of races, win that series, and add to her winnings for the year. So
I think
that was one of the main stories.
Yeah, I think for Courtney, it was not motivated by the fact that she could win the prize money of World Tour Major, because I can imagine those 15 grounds don't make any difference in how much she's paid. Probably, I would assume it's probably just because she really wanted to do those races and nothing more.
Yeah, but the UTWT was a great way of finding out about other races, and I am excited about what we've seen from World Trail Majors for this in recent months, where they've announced new additions to it, like the Grampians Peak miler in Australia, which was a race that I had only kind of found out about because of that as well. So let's see what they do going forward.
Absolutely.
Anyway, look, we've come to time. I know we are right on time that you needed to get away. So look, Francesco, I thank you so much for your time. Much appreciated, and we look forward to hearing your big sponsor announcement in a few weeks.
Thank you.
All right, take care.
Take care.